Not long ago, I was in Austin, Texas, and I had a chance to visit Holy Moly. If you're not familiar with Holy Moly, it is a mini golf course. They have a bar, they have a restaurant, they have a karaoke room. It's all very creative and cool and themed and in a pretty hip area in Austin, Texas. So, Holy Moly is one of several concepts from a company called Funlab. This week, we're going to learn all about Funlab. We're going to be talking to Zach Gelfand. He's the head of property for Funlab. Funlab is based in Australia. They've got a number of different concepts. They have locations in Australia, New Zealand. Now they're expanding into the United States. We're going to talk about the different brands that they have. We're going to talk about the company's unique culture. And Zach's also going to tell us a little bit about the differences in doing a real estate deal in the US compared with Australia. And my co host today is Rebecca Norton. She's an executive director at JLL based out of Melbourne. Let's go. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook and I research retail and real estate for JLL. So that I have it on tape, and Zach, I'm going to start with you. Tell us your name and what you do.
Yeah, so thanks. Great to get the opportunity to chat with you guys. Zach Gelfand. My official title is head of property for Funlab, and I've been there for about 3.5, getting close to 4 years as of May this year. So Funlab's got a long journey, and I've been lucky to be part of just the most current iteration. So
All right. Well, my co-host today is Beck, my peer at JLL from Down Under. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Beck, and I am an executive director with JLL who focuses on working with our retail clients and our retailers to help their businesses grow. We have a team of about 65 here in Victoria, and I've been with JLL for 5 years.
So Beck, you and I were talking about, hey, what are some fun, topics that we could have, conversations that we could have that sort of would span around the world. And FunLab came to mind because FunLab, not only is it going to be fun to talk about FunLab, right? But you also have locations both in the US and Australia and New Zealand, I think.
New Zealand,
right? We'll get into
correct.
it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we got to start high level, Zach, for folks that aren't familiar with FunLab. Like, what is it?
That is the greatest opening question, of course. I mean, it's a business that's been set up around. It started in 2001 with Strike Bowling, which is a bowling bar concept in Paran, which is kind of. I mean, it's hard to put into a US context because every city's got its own location, but Paran's like this kind of CBD or downtown fringe, sort of arty, sort of cool. Lots of bars, lots of restaurants, but at the time there was no real like bowling is like one of those activities that has always it's never really evolved that greatly until probably recently. But you can imagine in 2001 in little old Australia putting a bar and bowling together in the basement of this like kind of semi-heritage building in a very cool part, fringy, edgy kind of part of town was pretty groundbreaking. And so from that, FunLabs really evolved over the years through many iterations into sort of an umbrella company that encompasses a number of, I guess, social competitive in-house IP with many different activity sets within that. So we have Strike Bowling, which is our oldest brand. We have Archie Brothers Cirque Electrique, which is it's an amusement game. I must say, sorry to sort of wind back slightly, but all of our brands are bar, restaurant, and entertainment in equal parts. A lot of our competitors around the world are bar focused with a bit of entertainment or entertainment forward, and then food and beverage is an afterthought. With us, we really value all parts of that equation equally, and it's all very important to us. So all of our brands that I'll mention and talk about throughout this entire discussion, that's always part of our thought processes. So yeah, we have Strike Bowling, as I mentioned, Archie Brothers, which is an amusement game and attractions concept that's housed in a carnival theme theming and immersion is really big for us. And, it's one of the big themes that's come out of that LBE space is this immersive reality, like your Meow Wolves and people like that, where you really go into
For
another
listeners,
world.
LBE is location-based entertainment for folks that aren't familiar. Continue.
Yeah, sorry. And
No,
it
you're
is
fine.
specifically a US kind of term, I think. In Australia, we don't really refer to it. But I think it's the right term. I'm really out there. All my interactions in Australia, anywhere, I'm using LBE now. I think it's the perfect acronym. We're always looking for better acronyms. So we also have Holy Moly, which is also one of our in-house brands. So 2016, we launched Holy Moly in Australia. And that's just been huge. So, I think we've got about 23 locations for Holy Moly. Just to put it in perspective, so that's Australia, New Zealand, and the US. But Holy Moly is sort of one of those brands that just gets people really excited. So it's a mini golf putt bar. Every single venue has unique holes. That's part of the DNA of the business. Usually tailored to the local sort of environment. So, for example, in Surfers Paradise, which is in the Gold Coast in Queensland, sort of like the Florida of Australia, we put in holes that have like a beach theme with like giant oversized melting ice creams, like human size. So it's all about tongue in cheek and pop culture references and things like that. We then also have Hijinx Hotel, which is extremely hard to explain, but for everyone in the US, get to Irvine Spectrum around mid-year. We're going to be launching our first Hijinx Hotel.
For taking my kids to Hijinx for the first time, and they really thought they were going up in a lift. They were like, "We're in a hotel. We're going up in a lift, Mum. What are all these rooms?" So the concept obviously is activities.
Yeah.
Feels like you're in a hotel, like an old school fun hotel. My kids are like, "We're going up in the lift. What's going to be in these rooms?" So that venue really creates magic actually in such a simple way.
Yeah, and it really encompasses the DNA of what Funlab's about, and that is that innovation. There's a constant drive for innovation. We have like an annual Shark Tank style event, which is open to everyone in the business. We have about 2,500 employees, and it's a forum where they have to submit ideas, and Hijinx developed out of that. And what it is, it's imagine like Tim Burton meets like an old school New York hotel. So it's this like wacky, immersive, fully immersive environment, and you go in there and you check in and you literally get a room key and you go into a lift and you press level 8 and there's this whole lift experience. And I think it's an important part of that immersion thing is there's always this kind of like portal into another world, and that's a big theme in terms of the layout and the dynamics of a lot of our venues. And then you kind of like burst into this like corridor that looks like something out of some sort of scary movie. It's not scary, it's just very, very sort of stilted. And then all the rooms, actually you go into the rooms and it's an activity and you've got 4 minutes. So it's a time competitive play. So it's not an escape room where you have to solve something and get out. You've got 4 minutes, score as many points as you can. And there's like RFID technology on the cards. So it tallies it up. So you can imagine like corporate events or Bucks nights, you split into 2 or 3 groups and you go through a series of different activities. Some are mental, some are physical. And yeah, it's just fun. And for example, we had, when we launched it in Australia, I did like a road show with all the major, institutional landlords, all the big REITs, and Westfield, who's probably one of the dominant players here. Their whole leasing team came. This was in Sydney. It was about 30 or 40 of them, and just to see the inner kid brought out. These are guys and girls from like mid-20s to like probably mid-40s, all suited up, all looking pretty. Just one of the things is a ball pit. They were like diving headfirst into the ball pit, fully suited up. I think one girl lost her engagement ring in there. We found it, but that's what it's about. Bringing out that inner kid, having fun, forgetting about the outside world and just, enjoying it. I mean, I think we all lead really hectic lives. And so it's just about, just giving people that break and something new and something unexpected. And so sort of that's at the core of Funlab. There are a number of other brands that we run as well, but it's really those are the big four that we hang off, and we're constantly evolving and developing those brands so that, how we sort of lay them out as well is often very different and unique. Each location is sort of tailored to the local demographic. So that might be the skin, the way that it's presented. So, something like Strike Bowling, we have one in Fremantle that's done like a 1970s motel theme. So the whole thing's looks like you're walking into a motel with bowling lanes. Then we've got another location which is, got the theme of a country club, trophy room, clubhouse kind of vibe. So we really try and create that surprise and delight everywhere, and that sort of helps. I guess for major landlords, everyone's looking for point of difference, and why should we go with you over someone else? But also for our guests, it means that they can sort of almost collect different Funlab experiences. Like, okay, I'm going to do the bowling in this one. Now I've done this one, even though it's the same core activity. It can be a very, very different experience. Yeah. So, that sort of gives everyone a bit of a touch about, what we're about and sort of what activities we're engaged in.
What are do you have any growth targets by, maybe like high level by region or anything like that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something I get asked a lot, especially when we're presenting to landlords, and we're constantly sort of doing these sort of roadshow type presentations just to keep us top of mind. We want to be the first call for any new developments, and the answer is there's no specific target as such. In terms of Australia, we're pretty built out. So we've identified the key areas where we're very keen on. And so it's really comes down to making sure we get the right deal in the right location. And if 10 of those landed on my desk today, we'd have an appetite to do all 10. I mean, if they all had to happen at the same time, it'd be very difficult just from a resourcing point of view. And then similarly in the US, we've adopted a south-southwest sort of focus in terms of our entry strategy. So would we consider something outside that region? We would if it was like insanely compelling, and we're currently assessing some opportunities that go beyond that region. But the core of what we're looking at, it's such a big market. You've got to sort of hone in. But I guess ultimately there is a resourcing component to it, and not just capital, but the actual, the build. We don't build in big factories in Southeast Asia. We've actually got a whole series of actual workshops in Australia, in the suburbs of Melbourne. They're sort of more stage set theming companies that build a lot of our infrastructure. So there's we have a limited capacity. We can only build X number of Hijinx rooms and X number of Holy Moly halls because they're all individual for each unique location. Even the same hole will be different because we're trying to fit it in. So I'd say 6 to 10 projects a year globally is probably where we cap out, just from just the time and the energy and also the rigor that we put around. We'll build them out in a virtual sense with fly-throughs, and our design and development team will scrutinize, and even Michael Schreiber, who's the founder and CEO, still in the business, and a number of other people in the business and senior and various other positions are part of the design team. So it's a very cross-departmental group, and they will analyze that customer journey with a high degree of scrutiny. So just, it's not just a cookie cutter. Some of our competitors, and I'm not going to name them, but they're, some of the big guys that, that you go to one, you go to all of them. They're all very, very similar, and it's probably easier for them to mass produce. Yeah, so that's a limiting factor for us, I would suggest.
You made there about your competitors, not to name them specifically, but do you feel like you have a very niche competitor? Because ultimately you're selling fun, right? You're selling fun and experience, and that can come in many different ways for people: food and beverage, restaurants, concerts, different examples of that out and available to people to go and partake in. So thinking about the customer, then how do you define the customer, and how do you come to that point where you say this is going to land and we know this is the concept that people are going to resonate with?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can only talk about it from like a property lens. I'm not that deep in terms of the marketing side of things, but Look, it's an interesting point, and not only are we in competition for people from a sense of other direct competitors, it's people's time, and time is the most precious thing. So someone's going to give me 40 minutes or 2 hours of their life. I mean, that is being more valued than ever before. The other thing is the comfort of home is, I mean, and I can only speak for Australia, and I imagine the US is the same in New Zealand. Sort of, we're all sort of sitting in a similar sort of socio-economic band of the world. Like, people, you can do so much from home. So to get people to leave the home, you've got to reward them with a really good experience. In terms of competitors, it's, we've got some people that are very directly competing with us. In the US, we entered with Holy Moly. There's a number of reasons for that. Disney has, we have a licensing deal with them on Holy Moly, and there's been, I think, 4 or 5 seasons of Holy Moly. There's a TV show that's floating around out there, so there's some brand recall. But quite obviously, someone like a Putchak would be quite a direct competitor for that. And when we opened our first location in Denver, they also opened about 1.5 miles down the road, and they're doing really well from all accounts. And we're really, really happy with our results. We're bringing that quirky Aussie sort of uh, sort of larrikin-esque attitude there, and we're probably more theatrical in terms of our staffing, in terms, so I guess it's probably more they're the focus. And but in terms of like breaking down a demographic, we have a number of levers that are our preference. Things like 20 to 35-year-old market. We really look for a density of that. We're pretty confident we'll get the kids and families anyway, because what we do is fun, and they'll go where something's cool. I mean, the parents will go where the kids tell them to go. But it's that socially connected piece that sort of gives us those multiple day parts and lets us play in the day economy and the night economy. And so that's probably a big focus, that young corporate uni crowd, you know, in an Australian sense, which is probably a little bit different to the US, because our urban cores, like our CBD downtown areas, are very vibrant compared to a lot of US cities, where it's more, they have different areas for that type of activity. So it's really that it's a combination of those factors that really help drive the decision, and then space will dictate what combination of brands as well. In the US, we're only in market with Holy Moly, so that's a limiting factor as well. We're about to add Hijinx to the mix at Irvine in around mid-year, so that's in 35,000 square feet, and we're really, really excited about that being in a major shopping center. I mean, it's one of the top performers in the US. It's an incredible location. Obviously from a demographic point of view, there's probably not many other catchments that would compete with it, anywhere in the world, potentially, I would suggest. So it's a real litmus test for us and our brands, and seeing, how we cut through there, and what kind of sales and volumes we can do. We've heard indicatively that some of the restaurants there and some of the other F&B and entertainment is off the charts. So, it shows the strength of that market and that particular center, and we'll see. I mean, Hijinx is so unique, and Holy Moly and what we're delivering there is so unique, and maybe not for this forum, but if you ever want to, I can take you on a fly through. It's very impressive what we're going to put on the ground there. So
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to see it in person. The next time I'm in LA, after I'm actually going to be in LA in a couple of weeks, but it won't be open yet. But after that, I definitely want to check it out. So I not that long ago was in Austin and visited Holy Moly there in Austin. A lot of fun. And to your point, distinct from other competitors in the quirkiness, I would say, and uniqueness of the gameplay, and also the design too. It felt a bit more customized, I guess is the way to say it. So fantastic, really cool. Here's what I want to ask you. What are the differences between working in real estate in the US and in Australia? Are there many differences to it?
it's a tricky one, because we speak English, and so, and when you grow up in Australia, you watch so many American shows that You feel, and there's just a bond, I think, with Americans and Australians
Yeah.
anyway, right? Very
Mm-hmm.
deceptive, very, very deceptive. It's actually can catch you out really quickly because I think there's some subtleties that I've learned about really, really quickly. So in Australia, negotiations are really robust. They're quite brutal, I found. And I actually thought that Americans were much tougher, but I found that in business, I'm not saying they don't drive a hard bargain. They're very, very, very strong in negotiating and all that, but more just in terms of the interactions, have to be a lot more careful, a lot more respectful. There seems to be a lot more sort of chain of command, you know. So that's definitely a difference, just culturally, and you know, just the level of intensity. People can get their backs up pretty quickly, in terms of like retrading certain deal terms. And a lot of that goes on in the Australian context. Like there's a lot of argy-bargy.
What does that mean?
Argy-bargy.
Argy-bargy?
Oh, argy-bargy. Sorry, that's obviously an Australian term. So there's a lot of there's a lot of tussle. There's a lot of knocking heads, right? It can sometimes get pretty heated. And look, you got to remember with a Funlab style deal, there's millions on the line in terms of shell preparation as well
Yeah.
as us. So it's not a straightforward. It's not like a specialty store going like
You're taking 50,000
yeah.
square meters, right, Zach? That's the average sort of
Uh,
plate.
in the US, it's like 15 to 30,000 square feet. In Australia, it's 2,000 to 3,500 square meters, so 20 to 35,000 square feet. So
I'm talking small,
it's
big commitment from landlords for sure, and for you guys.
Yeah, yeah, and long
Are
lease
the
terms, and big grow. If you gross up the lease commitment and the capital, all in, it's tens of millions of dollars every time we put our flag in the ground. So yeah, I found it in the US as well. Just a lot more agents involved, whereas maybe that's just my personal. I've got a lot of personal network in Australia, so going direct, like people don't really use agents that much. Although there seems to be a growing trend, Beck. I mean, you could comment on this, but there's a lot more consultants on the ground these days representing tenants. I don't know whether you and your team find that there are more, less direct, but there's kind of this thing in Australia, like no one really cares about people's boundaries. Like I'm sure, Beck, if you had an issue, you'd just ring the head of tenant X. You wouldn't go through the agent or even their head of property. You just ring the person direct and go, why is this person giving my team a heartache? Like I just don't feel like that would happen in the US too much.
No, it wouldn't. You're right. There's a lot more hierarchy, and maybe that's because the organizations are bigger, so there's just more of a distance between, it's not as a flat of an organization.
Yeah, yeah. And then from a legal point of view, we have something in Australia called the ACCC, and that's like a non-government consumer competition watchdog. And they undertook a review of the Retail Leases Act. So we also have a thing which is called the Australian Retail Leases Act, which protects tenants. It's a government enforced. I don't know if it's actual law, but it's acted upon as it is. I mean, Beck, you might know a little bit more about the actual technicality behind Retail Leases Act, but it frames up the way that tenants and landlords can interact with each other, and it's a legal sort of.
The intent of that legislation is to ensure that we engage in, I guess, ethical practices between each other, right? So we ask things of you in an ethical manner with timeframes and deadlines and process to go about them. The Retail Leases Act to me obviously is really a tool when things go the wrong way. And it's the thing you don't want to have to lean on very often at all, right? Which is, I think, comes back to this piece you talk about with Australia, and the way in which we build relationships is really such a key thing in terms of how we do business here. And you're right. Like if I've got a problem, I'll just call the head of such and such company. Can we just work this through? Like we're all here for the same purpose. What's the roadblock? Let's work it through. And that relationship piece, I think, is really quite, special about doing business in Australia, because it does come down to how you feel about working with people, and those things do have an influence on where you make decisions. So I quite like that, because I think it means people who are people and retail people like us who are just like, 100 miles an hour, want to chat and learn new things, it makes our industry very dynamic. But yeah, the Retail Leases Act is, it's there to support retailers when there's landlords that don't maybe act in such a great way, and vice versa when tenants don't sort of uphold their lease obligations and things. It's that piece of yardstick that we can kind of work towards an outcome when things get a bit tricky between each other.
And further to that, there was like a review of all major leases under this sort of bit of legislation called Fair Contracts Law. So basically, they hauled in all the in-house counsels of all the major landlords and did a review. This is the ACCC of all the leases and made them standardized, right? So they're in simple English that probably like a 15-year-old could understand. So compared to the US, so the first time I got a lease. And I'm not going to say which organization it was for, but it was a big, many $100 billion fund that owned a piece of property on the West Coast. And I get an email from someone in our organization, our chief growth officer, who's also the US CEO and global COO now. She goes, "Can you just look at this? There's a 200-page lease written in like ancient English." That would never happen in Australia. Yeah, our solicitor at the time, it took him about 8-9 hours to review the document. Said there was that many gotchas in there. He didn't even know where to start. In the end, we didn't proceed with that lease, thankfully. But yeah, not one of the leases that I've looked at is the same. So it's very, very hard to read. It's extremely hard. The language is difficult, even down to the font. I know that sounds really weird, but they use a particular Times Roman kind of style font in all the legal documents in the US, often capitals as well everywhere. Whereas in Australia, like I think even the format of the documents, and I've got lots and lots of leases from Australia, they're very, very lots of white space, very easy to read. Rarely over 80 pages, but their 80 pages in Australia is nothing like it would be 30 pages of a US lease. And so there's a lot of other terminology, just like contingencies and schedules and all sorts of things. We use annexures here. No one in America had ever heard of the word annexure that I've dealt with. That? It's like a schedule at the back of the lease.
The stuff at the back that you
Yeah.
Summary bits at the back.
So these things are important when you're trying to like weigh up, because we have like overarching, parameters in terms of when we're looking at leases. Also from a Funlab specific perspective, we've been working with a legal person, and Funlab's always it particularly is about a family. So there's a lot of people that are in the business. There's a lot of people like satellites that revolve around the business that have been in it from day one or from early on. So like our architecture and interior design team, they're all independent businesses, but for 20 years all they've done is basically Funlab and a few other projects. So they're quasi family anyway. Same with our in-house. So that the lady that we've been working with, she could look at a lease and knew immediately. I didn't have to explain Funlab to her. She knew our requirements. She was a pit bull that went after it. In the US, we had to educate. We have to educate the legal teams. This is what we're about. This is the reason why we need to argue for these points. And also, I guess the landlords themselves, they don't 100% know what they're getting into, because there's not enough proof out there of our trading and whatnot. So for them to let go of certain things that they would never let go of is also probably pretty hard. So there's some pretty big things. So you've got agents, got language, in terms of legal documents. The inconsistency between one group and another, which you just don't get here, even though they're all really unique and different. The leases, when you compare across a portfolio, that they all fall into a fairly similar sort of band, and so that makes it quite complicated, because I've got to recommend to our board to sign the lease. I mean, they can approve the deal, but we don't have to do it if I'm not comfortable. And to sit there and read these leases, and I don't have a law degree, but I've got a lot of experience in the area, and I think we've got relatively good legal counsel. But yeah, it is English, but it's kind of a different language. So yeah, it's that creates challenges.
You said your company does a Shark Tank every year. I'm gonna pitch an AI tool that changes all of the American leases into English, so people can understand it. How about that?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Don't wait for the Shark Tank event. Just if you've got an idea for us, shoot it through. We'll yeah.
Beck, do you have another
Yeah, I was just
question?
gonna say, I mean, I think these chats are always great to learn more about your business. And, we love talking with you, Zach, and hearing about your growth plans. But I guess we also like to know about you as the human and the person that works in such a dynamic business, right? So we're a people business in retail. So I just always like to sort of hear like what brands inspire you when you think about.
I'm probably going to speak just selfishly about Australia, but you know, we've got brands like Mecca that are just phenomenal. They continue to innovate in an area which you would think there's no room. Department stores have got it, Sephora, all these other things. So just for other people who don't know, Mecca's Australia's sort of, I guess, cosmetics and beauty. Beck, you might be able to fill in the blanks here because I'm not really the customer, but
Queens with their drunk elephant and their Sol Janeros and all those brands that are trend on TikTok and stuff. But it's Mecca's the place that they kind of just want to go and hang out. And a lot of the products they probably couldn't afford, but it's that entry level into, I guess, that social aspect of being in store, engaging with products, seeing things online, and coming into the stores as well. But yeah, they create great experiences in Mecca, and it overwhelms me when I go in there. That's for sure.
it overwhelms me when I walk past and see 500 people in there. Their stores are incredible, and I'm not 100% sure what their global plans are, but they are. I've heard rumors that they're looking at US, and I think that they will dominate if they get over there. Um, other brands like Cotton On Group, they're just an incredible group. They just dominate wherever they are, and once again, they're competing in a market that's just like so supposedly overrun. Like, how can there be a new idea? But they've found a way. They've found an angle that's really unique. And probably the last one in terms of other non-Funlab would be GYG, which, once again, taking Mexican to the US is a ballsy move. And, I read now that they're in Japan dominating and they're in many markets around the world and they just continue to grow and evolve. I love the whole package that they deliver to the market and the experience and just the way they present themselves and how they go about their business is super exciting and they're growing fast. And, so probably,
For
yeah.
just for listeners, so that's Guzman y Gomez Mexican Kitchen, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is unique. A Mexican chain originating from Australia. I haven't been myself, but I've heard good things about it.
They do an amazing job. Great bowls, great marketing, just the whole package, really. So
I just thought of something. I was reading an interview that you did, and you talked about your job interview. Tell us about what that's all about. That it's unique, right?
yeah, it seems to be something that is very uniquely Fun Lab. So we had a few rounds on the telephone, and then they said, "Okay, you got to come in for an interview." I'm like, "Great, no problem." Then I get an email that says, "Come dressed up." I'm like, "What does that mean?" Like, so I ring them, and the person I've been speaking to, I'm like, "Look, I got this invite. It said come dressed up. What does it mean?" And they just said, "Read the email. It's all there." So I was like, "Okay." So yeah, I ended up deciding I'd go as a rock star. So I put on like the tattoo arm sleeves and a mullet wig and huge sort of gold oversized sunglasses and to be honest, I was pretty confident. I thought, this is cool. An ACDC t-shirt and big boots and everything. But then I was like, okay, rolled up and obviously you can't park. There's no parking around. The office is in Abbotsford. Once again, one of these like downtown fringe areas, which is really gentrifying and very old, one of the oldest suburbs, one of the oldest little pockets in Melbourne, actually. So these old Victorian houses and warehouses and cafes and yeah, bit of urban decay around the place, lots of graffiti and whatnot. Uh, I'm like, oh my, when I parked, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to walk to the office. Someone might beat me up down here looking like this. I might just think I'm being a smartass. So yeah, that was pretty nerve wracking. But yeah, got in there, and I was like, "Is this a practical joke?" And then I was met by the two people who were going to interview me. One of them was in a life size neoprene like ketchup bottle, so I never even saw his face. And the other lady was like wearing a pink tutu and like a like a nurse's hat and like a few other random bits and pieces, and the whole interview was conducted. No one stepped out of character for like an hour and a half.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it is fun. It is fun at Funlab.
It's fun to have fun. It's on the door. And, you know, a little while, probably about 2 years after I started, I chatted to someone about it, and I was like, you know, because I was always really interested. I'm like, who was I competing against? Tell me who they are. They wouldn't tell me. I mean, Australia's a really small market, so more than likely I knew. But what they did say is that there was a few people that they're quite interested in, and when they got that, they said, "Oh, well, you know, I'm not coming dressed up," and they said, "No problem, your interview's cancelled." So it's something they take seriously. It doesn't matter what level or what role you're going for. It doesn't matter whether you're just, you know, a cook's assistant or the CMO. You know, have to come dressed up, and they take a photo and post it on the internal newsletter, the weekly newsletter. So yeah.
Oh my
So
gosh.
everyone can see
Company.
who's coming in.
So fun. That is just such a great welcome to a culture that says this is what we're about. I think that's great.
Well, like so we're all in this kind of big open plan room in a warehouse, and our functions team, every time they do like a pretty big lockout or a buyout of one of our venues, everyone has to put tools down, music goes up, pumping, and you know, dance. I remember the first time it happened. One of the people I work with, who's quite senior, grabs like a megaphone. He's like, "Come on, finance, stop working, start dancing. Come on, everybody. You know, Becky did a lockout at Alexandria for $50,000. Yeah," and everyone's like, "Woo!" Not quite Wolf of Wall Street. There's no like, but you know, pumping. You know, clubby house music throughout the whole building. Everyone stopped work for about 10, 15 minutes. So, you know, I think what they're trying to do is find people who, you know, can engage with them, you know, on that level and don't take themselves too seriously. So, yeah, it's pretty unique in terms of the culture at Funlab. And, you know, I guess that's all of these things, they all kind of feed into a lot of our decision making, you know, staffing, how we're going to staff, how we're going to bring that, you know, that sort of diversity and sort of inclusiveness sort of, it goes throughout the whole business. And it also extends to our customers as well, our guests. You know, we one of the people at one of these Shark Tank style events, it's called For Fun's Sake, and they came up with an idea to create like times of the week when you can have like a low, you know, for people with autism or whatever that need that low stimulation environment. So the lights are down, the noise is down, whatever. So that sort of mentality, when you get people from diverse backgrounds and who are not too stilted, it means the ideas can flow as well. So, you know, everything in the business is kind of connected. You know, that's how you give birth to something like a Hijinx. You can't have people in suits that are stiff. I'm not saying all people in suits are stiff, but when they're in suits, they become a stiffer version of themselves, right? They can't think as freely, you know. And so, you know, that's what creates the dynamic nature of what we're all about.
We're fast running out of time. Beck, what's one more good question we should ask?
Just what, I guess, what would make it easier for you to do business with US, or, I mean, you talked about the US, but like quick snapshot, what would make it easy to do business with us in Australia?
I think that's it. I think it's a difficult one to answer, unfortunately, because the cost of what we found is our capital requirements for these projects continues to go up. Rents are pretty firm at the moment everywhere. So, and then you've got, I mean, particularly in Australia, utilities are out of control. So, you know, there's just a lot of these fixed costs of making a lot of projects not stack. So, look, I think overall, there is a real good, genuine will, and there's always a lot of good feeling with landlords and with Funlab. And, you know, often our CEO, Michael, will get involved, and other senior members of the executive team get involved in a lot of the meetings because they bring a lot of experience. And I think that's also something unique about us, is that, you know, when we're negotiating, a lot of these people will come they'll be involved at different parts. And I think a lot of the big landlords like that. they get to actually meet the principals along the way, and so, you know, there are some silly things that I could say, you know, like, you know, crazy deals and all that, but like in reality, you know, they're really hard to come by, and often the best deals are not necessarily the best for business. So, you know, I think just more understanding of what we're about. In the US, I think it's trickier. I think we've got still a lot of work to do, and I think once Hijinx is open and we can assess and it's a Hijinx and Holy Moly combo, so it's two brands. It's a co-located venue, which is more our style these days, to have two or more or three or more brands in one area to create that density, that weight, that gravity of entertainment, increased drive time. You know, people are going to get in their car and drive for 40 minutes if they can do three things, or spend 3 hours there instead of just come for a 20-minute exercise. So, you know, I think that will change the conversation significantly and open us up to more opportunities. But, you know, probably if I was pushed, I would say I think just the amount of capital for these deals is so enormous that landlords need to structure the deal that gives a tenant like a Funlab a softer landing, because you might need 2 or 3 years to develop the business. And if that means that we have to give away more of the upside later in the term, so be it. But you got to think, if you're putting down, you know, in the US, it's like anywhere from 5 to 15 mil US. It's a lot of capital, plus the number of staff. We're a very staff heavy business. You need time to build that business. And if you're on the hook for a capped out rent on day one, then it's very, very hard. You're putting all the teams under pressure, all their KPIs. You know, I would say that'd probably be the number one thing that's sort of a bit of a bugbear for us. And that's probably across the board. It's like, give us a chance in the first few years just to get some runs on the board to pay back that investment. Then, you know, we're happy to
Yeah,
share.
absolutely. Well, Rebecca and Norton, thank you so much for co-hosting with me today. This has been fun. And Zach Gelfand with Funlab, thank you so much for joining us for Where We Buy. This has been awesome.
Thanks so much for having me.
You can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app, on Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or you can always find us on the web at wherewebuy.show. We also post a ton of cool videos and interviews on LinkedIn and YouTube, video tours, interviews with folks that you won't hear on this audio podcast. You can check it out by going to the website everythingweknow.show. If you have a specific question about retail, shopping centers, or retail real estate, you can feel free to connect with me and send me a message on LinkedIn. You can find me by searching for James Cook, JLL. Our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license.